Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest foray into the listener questions mailbag. Today, we're asking if any MLS team could hang in a match with the national team. We discuss whether João Félix was born in the wrong era. And we want to know if anyone cares who manufactures Liverpool's kit. I know Graham does. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan. I loved that question because I sort of asked Graham that same question point blank, and now we get to go further into it on this episode.
It also reveals to the audience how much of a grumpy old man I've become about kits, having been a lover of that kind of thing previously, Taylor. Yay.
You can still like kits, just not. You don't have to be like, ooh, Adidas now. I never saw the day. Unlike
what
Graham.
A drop. Wow. Yeah. Look at this collab. Graham Ruffin, hello.
I mean, I feel personally slighted at the start of this episode because that is entirely my brand. And yes, I was very excited about Adidas becoming Liverpool kit suppliers. And yes, I am excited about whatever collab they've got cooking up for next season.
You know, Graham, when you watch these sort of Cribs episodes and they have those giant wardrobes where you open them up and there's a million shirts and all the shoes lined up, do you have like a repository like that for all your shirts?
I do, and I got a workman came into my house. I've recently moved house, had to go up into the loft, and so I had to go into the room, the football room, and the cupboard that I use for my shirts, and wasn't able to warn him before he went into there and opened the cupboard, and his words were, "What is going on in here?" And I was like, "Adult child."
It's a load-bearing cupboard wall of shirts. We use that to really hold up this side of the house.
That's very impressive. It reminds me, there's a TV show called Hacks on HBO where the star of the show, a famous comedian, they have so many clothes that they keep them in a warehouse like 50 miles away from their house, and they occasionally go and visit it to find old stuff. I imagine you've got a warehouse as well, right?
I mean, that might be in the pipeline, yes. I might have no choice. Or a second house.
Here's what I would say, Graham. I think you should question that worker's credentials, because if they have been doing that job long enough and been in people's houses long enough to open up a wardrobe and see a bunch of shirts and be like, what is this? I'm sure they've seen worse, or at least a veteran contractor who's been in people's houses has seen a lot worse than a big thing of football shirts. That doesn't feel that surprising to me, is I guess what I'm saying.
See, the thing is, one half of the wardrobe is shirts, the other half is my Andy Murray shrine. And so I think he was reacting to that, yeah.
Your Andy Murray real doll? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Now I understand.
Okay. Before that reveal, I was picturing this guy sort of opening the dishwasher and going, "Plates? What are you doing here? This is crazy. Wow."
Cinnamon in the spice rack? Never.
Now I've seen everything. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, by the way, to support us is the best way to do so. You can get bonus episodes, including a bonus listener question, as we do every week on the feed there, bonus video content, and access to our Discord server where you can come and have a chat with us. Please do that if you haven't already. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. You can also use our Discord to drop us a listener question, as several people have done on this here episode. Let's go to the first question here from Jojo Bajo? Jojo Bajo? Is it a Beatles reference? I'm not sure.
Jojo.
Either way.
Junior Shabadoo?
Joey Jojo Shabadoo Bob. Could be that. Yeah. Anyway. The question is there an MLS team that could compete with the USMNT? If they played 10 times, how many times does the MLS team win? Now, Taylor, fundamentally, or philosophically for this question, is it a case of the best MLS team playing against the USMNT, or one that's best suited for international read garbage soccer?
Is there a difference? What would be the difference for you? Who are the two teams that you're alluding to?
I'm not sure what's on specific teams, but more sort of playing style, because obviously international soccer has a slightly different oeuvre to the week in, week out game, right? So there'll be a different approach in terms of maybe... Go on, Graham.
I thought you were just talking about like general quality, right? So if we're talking about Inter Miami, my answer is very different to if we're talking about DC United or Toronto FC.
It was between Columbus and Inter for me, and Inter Miami for me. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think though clubs tend to have the advantage theoretically over national teams because they just have more reps and more experience together, because they can play a more sort of unified style on both sides of the ball, and the crew especially are going to be playing high-intensity soccer. They're going to be pressing. They're going to be hunting in packs. I will still say I think I'm being generous in saying maybe 1 out of the 10 times the crew beats the U.S., and that's not meant to really be a slight against the crew or even Major League Soccer. It's just that at this point, that starting 11 for the United States, if it's the full starting 11 of our best possible players, plays at a really high level and is very, very good. And I think if you put those 11 into Major League Soccer and had them be a team in MLS, I think that they probably win the Supporters' Shield and maybe MLS Cup. I think that the talent level is that high. So I think putting it in that perspective for me made it easier to think that it would be a bit more of a challenge. Inter Miami is a trickier one for me. Graham, I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Taylor, about I tried to do the same equation of I looked at the US team from front to back, and I think you've got 7 or 8 players who would be the best player in their position in MLS in the US national team. But what you're saying about if you put them in MLS and had them play a season, they would then have the benefit of the club team, right? So they would have the repetition. So we're talking about, like, that's the equation, is how much is that repetition worth to a national team, because they don't have the opportunity to get that. So if we're talking about Inter Miami, and look, this is all, there's no way you could truly know. This is all on gut, right? So my gut tells me that if we're talking about Inter Miami when you're up against Messi and Suarez and all those guys, I think Inter Miami probably wins 5 of those matches against the US. The US wins 3 and then 2 draws. But then I think as you go down the standings, very quickly that flips. Where even the Columbus Crew, like I don't know how good the Columbus Crew are this season post Cucho. They had a bad result of the weekend there. So I would maybe even fancy, even by the time you get down to the Crew in the standings, for that to change and for the US to win the 5 games and for Columbus to win 3 games and 2 draws. I think by the time you get down to like your TFCs and DC Uniteds or whatever, it's probably a clean sweep. There's a tipping point, right, where the talent just becomes so superior that actually the repetition doesn't matter so much.
I think I wouldn't go as far as to say they would win 5, Inter Miami. I think they might win like the first couple, as the U.S. is maybe scared of Messi and too defensive, and then I think the U.S. would figure out pretty quickly that backline is either going to give us penalties or red cards. We should probably just attack them more aggressively, and I think it would shift pretty quickly. But I hear you about everybody else, Graham. I think it's just a sign that the USMNT is stronger than it's been, both in terms of its present manager and in terms of its player profile.
But if Miami had to start all of those games with 10 men, they would win all 10 games, I presume. So we'll see there. But I suppose what I was getting at with my initial question, Taylor, is there a specific team profile which would be suited well to play against a Poch team? Is it, for example, I don't know, like a team that defends really well, that can play well on the counter? I'm asking if Charlotte FC could play against USMNT, I suppose, with that question a little bit, because
I did wonder less about Charlotte, honestly, because I've watched less of them, and more like if LAFC were maybe having a stronger start to the season with the way that they play, with defend and counter, and have historically, maybe less so right now, very good players to play on the break and to punish you. I do wonder if that would be a style. I think ultimately my answer, or a style that would work, ultimately my answer is I don't really think I know, because I'm still not sure I could tell you fully what a USMNT under Poch is trying to do. Do they want to be ball dominant? Are they okay with not having possession? Are they trying to be direct? Are they trying to possess? I'm still a little bit hazy on some of the details as to what they're going to be. I think the Nations League will give us more clarity on that front. Yeah. But I do think if we were going with the Berhalter era, if you had a team that was very well organized defensively and just gave up like few clear-cut opportunities, a lot of low XG shots, I think that does give you a much better run of form for the MLS team.
Yeah, and that might be Charlotte, Ryan. They had best defensive record in the East last season. LAFC is a good shout. Seattle Sounders as well, one of the best defensive units. Bit of a rough start to this season defensively, but very strong last season, so I don't know. You're absolutely right, Taylor. It's kind of difficult to pin what the profile of the Poch team is right now. You would say this group of players has had trouble breaking down low defensive blocks, but they've just brought in Gio Reyna and Diego Luna into that roster, and we were talking yesterday about how that could be a planned sort of evolution of how this team plays. So it's all a little bit hazy.
There you go. All right, thank you, Jojo Bajo, for that question. Listen, if you just heard a fire truck going past, it was either a real fire truck or one full of lawyers. I'm in New York and there is a lot of noise, so I apologise if you heard that. Let's go to a question from Paul Nichols, an MLS-themed question as well. With Don Garber hinting at a 32-team MLS, do you think the league should have an East and the West play separately for the regular season? So 16 teams per conference playing every team, home and away. That would make a 30-game regular season. You take the top 8 from each and create a 16-team tournament for the bracket for the postseason. Thoughts on that, says Paul. I mean, Graham, I like it. It sounds good. I love the idea of that eight-team postseason and sort of being separated for the East and the West. It would eliminate a lot of travel, for example, which I know is a complaint of a lot of players. But ultimately, a few fewer games means teams making less money, having less home games, so they probably wouldn't want to do it.
Yep, that was one of my notes. So you've got 4 fewer regular season games, which I am fine with, but not so sure Apple with their $2.5 billion 10-year deal, who apparently MLS padded out the schedule by introducing Leagues Cup to appease them and add more inventory to that deal. So I'm not entirely sure they would want to lose games from that deal. My personal opinion, I mean, I'd be in favour of anything that balances the schedule a bit, because even with 30 teams, I kind of have to put out of mind that it's lopsided. It's my biggest issue with MLS. I'd rather fix that before introducing promotion and relegation. It's something that I really don't like about the schedule in a league format where you don't have teams playing the same number of games against each other. So in that sense, I like it. The idea of, can I just nail down what's meant by a post-season tournament? Would that be... Like, are we talking about like a group phase, or is that, am I reading too much into that? Are we just talking about the same old sort of playoff bracket that we have now?
He says tournament or bracket, but I would assume it's playoff format bracket.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I would want to protect the elimination format rather than having like a group and then a semi-final and a final. I think that's kind of like the best of MLS, or certainly the most exciting MLS gets in the season. So I would protect that. I guess splitting the league into two separate conferences where they don't play each other kind of kills the supporter shield as a concept. But I was thinking about how you get around that. I would be in favour of the team that finishes top of the East and the team that finishes top of the West. They're the Eastern and the Western champions, rather than having the champions have like a conference final in the playoffs. Almost like have the playoffs as its own thing, unrelated to the season as a whole, which I know they kind of do already. But yeah, I think the Shield might be a casualty of this format.
The annoying thing is, though, Graham, that if you followed that model, like the NFL has that where you are your division champion, but then it's like only when you win your playoffs to the point where you make the Super Bowl are you then the NFC or AFC champion. So you might still have that where like the top Western Conference team then loses in the playoffs, is the team that makes it to MLS Cup from the West, then the Western Conference champion. It gets murky very quickly because it's Major League Soccer and because there are too many teams, to your original point.
Well, just don't do that.
I do not.
I mean, we can just have them say, there's one trophy for the West and one trophy for the East, and then the Cup. And that's it.
Flip side, everybody gets a trophy. And from what I'm led to believe, everybody loves when everybody gets a trophy, and people are all about participation. I like this idea in theory. I do not love the full geographic separation. I like the idea of having more divisions, essentially, to give you theoretically a better competitive balance, but to kind of also make the schedule less cluttered. I think USL did this. Maybe they still do, but I think they did it a couple years ago, where it was like the Western Conference was its own thing, the Eastern Conference was its own thing, and then you meet in the championship game. But as a result, it just felt like two completely separate leagues, and if you're in the East, you're not really paying attention to the West, and vice versa. And I think also you'd probably have owners that were very annoyed because they're not getting a Messi game, or they're not getting a game against this team that's guaranteed to give you good attendance. The counterpoint would be maybe that makes those owners spend some money to get a Messi of their own. But I think there would be frustration about not everybody not playing everybody, and I think there would be frustration from supporters about not getting to play other different teams. So what if we went with the NFL model, or a modified version of the NFL model? If we go to 32 teams, you've got 4 divisions with 8 teams in each. You play each team in your division twice in a season, once home, once away. So that'll give you 14 games. Then you play the other teams in the other divisions once each. You play one division home, you play one division away. So you're then getting 8 more games at home, 8 more games on the road. That'll give you 30 games total in the regular season, and then you could do playoffs from there.
I like how Ryan. I admire Ryan how you tried to do sums. After a while, I gave up. I'll just sounds great.
So that's the same proposition that Paul's suggesting, but it's obviously with more coast to coast games as well, right?
Well, yeah, because now you would play everybody in the league once per season, but you would get more and you would have those divisions theoretically be based on geography. So then you would be able to kind of create more local rivalries. So similar to how in American football you get the NFC East, everybody plays each other once at home, once on the road. So it kind of creates those more permanent rivalries, and then you get other rivalries along the way when you play non-division teams. I think I've solved it, and I take your skepticism to mean that you all totally agree and don't see any issues with this.
Absolutely agree. I think we could all agree if there was a 16-team tournament or bracket for the postseason, MLS would make it like best of 12 for all the rounds, and it would last forever, right? We agreed that was what would happen?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, that feels right.
All right, Paul Nichols, thank you very much for your question indeed. When we come back, we're talking about João Félix. We're talking about the role of the centre-back in different systems. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Brandon Hunt has been in touch via our Discord. João Félix has shown talent but has yet to live up to his potential playing for large UEFA... well, we'll get there. He's playing for large UEFA clubs. Is this because he fits the old model of a number 10 and doesn't fit into the modern system? Do you think a move to the League of Number 10s, MLS, would allow him to find the system he needs to find consistent success? Do you think he'd have a Ricky Pooge type impact on the league, or would some MLS teams simply be lighting cash on fire to bring him over? All right, Graham, let's get into it. Do we buy the premise that João Félix has shown the talent and potential of a top number 10, or is it just because he's from another era he doesn't quite fit into how things are done these days?
So I actually don't know what João Félix is as a soccer player. I don't think he does fit the old model of a number 10, because I've said this before, I don't know what his position is. He's probably the most confusing player that I have ever watched. And like, I've watched a lot of him at this point. I've watched him in the Liga, I've watched him in the Premier League, I've watched him in Serie A. And he just doesn't really fit anywhere. I don't think he's creative enough to be a classic number 10. But then I don't think he has the speed or the directness to be a winger either. I don't think he has the penalty box presence to be a centre forward. So I don't really know what he is. I think the best that I've seen of him is when he has been like a second striker. Because I do think his positional awareness is quite good, and he takes up good areas inside the final third. What his execution and his output is not particularly good, but in terms of his positioning, that's probably the strongest part of his game. So if you have a focal point, I think in theory you could get Felix into good positions around him. So congratulations to João Félix. You've signed for DC United to play next to Christian Benteke. I bet he's absolutely delighted about that.
That would work, man. I really enjoyed this question because it was one, but being fully honest, that I read and was like, I'm answering that last. I will get to that when I get to that one, and then came back around and started to take it piece by piece and really ended up enjoying it because I think my answer is like, yes, I think it would be a really smart signing for MLS. I think it might also be lighting a bunch of cash on fire, and maybe it would work, and you'd light cash on fire simultaneously. Good, yeah. But to Graham's point, I think if I'm trying to figure out what his best position has been, João Félix, I think it is as a second striker, and I think about when he doesn't work at Atleti, it's because he doesn't really want to do the defensive stuff. He doesn't want to track back. He doesn't want to defend like near post corners the way Antoine Griezmann will. And I think he wants more creative freedom. I think he wants to be able to run around and make things happen. I think about his best season, and that's probably when he breaks through at Benfica, 20 goals and 11 assists in all competitions that year. And that's with Bruno Lage playing a 4-4-2 and basically using him as a second striker, giving him the freedom to operate between the lines and rely on individual flair and creativity. I think Graham is correct that I don't know how much he creates in terms of line-splitting passes or anything like that. I do think of him more as an individual dribbler, but I think he didn't get that freedom at Atletico. I don't think he got it at Barcelona or Chelsea. So I think provided he joined a club with enough other attacking options, with him undeniably being the kind of string puller and creator a la Ricky Pooge, I think he would do really, really well because I think he's going to get more time and more space. I think there's going to be less quality defending. I think there's a chance we see him at his best he has looked since he first broke through. He might see it as a sort of a downturn in form or like a level beneath him, which I think would be a mistake, but that would be the only drawback I see is does he come here and try to prove that he is elite at what he does and is just kind of out of sorts in other leagues, but in the League of Tens, which is absolutely what MLS should brand itself, maybe he thrives. I think that would be really interesting, and I kind of think, even with everything I've just said about how he needs to be surrounded by good options, the DC United shout is kind of fascinating, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, there's a contradiction in my answer here, which is, I think it's clear at this point, I don't have a particularly high opinion of João Félix. I also think for the right team, he makes an impact in MLS. And it would need to be the right team. Like, it need to be a coach that understands what he is better than I do, because I'm a little bit confused by João Félix. But I think if you get him to the right club, you get him to a coach who really embraces him, who builds around him. I think that point, Taylor, about again, this is another contradiction. Build around him, but have other players who are also difference makers, so it's not all on him. But gone are the days in MLS where you could plop a European star into the league, and no matter what, they would succeed. Look at Olivier Giroud, hasn't been great for LAFC. Look at Marco Reus, hasn't been great for LA Galaxy. So there's a spectrum here, right, where João Félix could come to MLS, make an impact, but if he joins the wrong team, he could also be a flop.
Is Bruce Arena a coach that would get the best out of João Félix? He seems like a guy who is okay with letting players cook, letting them try things on their own, but putting them in positions that he thinks make logical sense and then seeing how they respond. I don't know if San Jose have the pieces that we are talking about to really make him elevate above maybe what Royce has done. But Bruce Arena feels like a manager who would sort of be like, we don't need to make this so complicated. Everybody's overthinking this. Play him as a second striker. Let him run around. Let him take people on. We'll win some games. We'll be just fine.
There you go. Harry Redknapp sounds like the perfect coach for him, actually, Taylor. Now you mention it like that. I think he does seem to me like the perfect profile of player who could thrive in MLS, sort of a misfit toy in Europe. So I guess, Taylor, my question is, which Turkish team does he have to go to first before he makes his MLS move?
Oof. I would say Fener, but I'm not sure Jose wants anything to do with him. There is the Portuguese connection. Fener could work. I'll say that feels like Galatasaray.
All right, good stuff. All right, Graham, any more on
and then sold to Saudi Arabia in 4 months.
Oh, naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. The amount of transfer value that man has generated, by the way. Very, very impressive.
Sizable.
It's money laundering.
Oh, wow. That fire truck of lawyers might need to swing back around. That just went past me. Anyway, Brandon, thank you very much indeed for your question. Let's go to one from Calvin Lazum, who says, what adjustments do centre-backs need to make when they play in a 3 centre-back system at club level, but a 2 centre-back system at international level? Now, presumably, Graham, there is an adjustment there because you're standing next to 2 people instead of 1 person, fundamentally, but there's going to be a lot more to it than that.
Ryan showing off that counting ability once again.
I know, right?
Let me just check the math on that, Ryan. 2 seconds. Yeah, that checks out.
Oh, good,
well
excellent. When I played when I was at university and before that, I was always in a back 4, so I never really did the back 3 thing. So I was a centre back by trade, but I didn't really get the experience of a back 3. Apart from the odd time when it was just felt thoroughly confusing because we didn't do it very often.
Yeah, I also played in a back 4, so I was a right back which as Joe established, when was that, earlier this week or last week, is where you put players who aren't very good and you don't have a use for them, you put them to right back, the Gary Neville paradigm.
João Félix.
But, well, maybe that's his future, is at right back for Fenerbahce. I never... Maybe this speaks to what British football was like. Taylor, when you played college soccer or just general soccer, you played, was there tactical flexibility? I felt like we were just always in a 4-4-2. They would literally never changed for 8 years when I played kids soccer.
We had variety, but it wasn't necessarily academic or intellectual. There was a season when our entire team hit a growth spurt at the same time, and we were all 6 inches taller than every team we played. So our coach quite lovingly called us the Goon Squad, and we played a 4-2-2-2, all through the middle, and it was basically just fullbacks get forward, cross it in. We've got 6 inches on everybody.
Pioneering.
We should win some headers. So there is that. And then
was there someone from Red Bull at your games?
Yeah, my coach was named Dave Red Bull. How did you know that? He had wings and horns. But we also played a 3-4-3 at times, and I personally, that is my favorite formation, a 3-4-3. I really love the balance it gives you. I've always been kind of confused why there has been so much Manchester United shifting to a back 3 under Ruben Amorim. Will players be able to handle it? It's not that big of a difference, in my opinion. It is, I think, a lot easier to defend in a back 3. If you are a center back shifting from a 2 to a 3, you're going to have more license to step out and be aggressive in when you step and how you're kind of policing possession. You're going to have, theoretically, more time with less pressure on the ball because you have kind of shorter passing options, but it's less detrimental. It's not great if you turn the ball over as a center back, but as opposed to being one of two and you turn it over and now the other team can go right at you. If you are in a more advanced position or you're being tasked with playing riskier passes as a left-sided center back with cover behind you, you have license to kind of try different things there. So I think almost the shift to a back two is the harder one to have to adjust to. And so I think that's where you have to be a bit more cautious. So a center back moving from a 3 at club level to a 2 at international level, I think is just going to require more caution in when you are stepping, more caution in the balls that you are trying to play and the passes you are trying to attempt. And then with both, it just requires a ton of communication and organization to know who steps in the 3, who tracks the central striker in the 3, when do you shift off, do you play a zone, is it man marking? All of those can be trickier. With a 2, it is a simplified thing because you're just dealing with the one other central defender, but I think it requires a lot more communication and then trust in the players around you.
Yeah. Yeah, great. To come back to the college level, I also was very much ingrained in a 4-4-2, but I suppose this isn't anywhere near replicating the professional experience, but when it was a back 3 occasionally, it just felt as a defender that you're just a bit more vulnerable because there was fundamentally one fewer of you. Unless you had wing backs who had absolute lungs on them, they weren't defending generally at that level. So that's the day. I suppose, like, psychologically maybe it feels a bit riskier when you're in a 3. I don't know if that once again replicates to a professional level.
Yeah, I found a good piece by Dominic Fifield for The Athletic from a couple of years ago, and it was a piece with Matthew Upson and who else was in it? Sol Campbell, Ian Cathro, who is a Scottish coach who's coached at a number of Premier League teams, and it was on this very subject. And I found a lot of good insight in it because I couldn't. I mean, obviously, as you say, Ryan, not relatable to the professional level, but I couldn't relate to this myself playing soccer. I don't think I ever played in a back 3. I don't think Dunblane Football Club ever did that when I was 14 years old. So there was a lot of insight in that article. Yeah, no, and it kind of outlined a lot of the stuff that Taylor touched upon there. One of the things Upson points out is how in a back 3 you can be a bit more aggressive with tracking your opponents. So if you're in a back 4, striker moves off you, most of the time you'll pass that player onto the midfielder and stay in your shape. Whereas in a 3, because you have that coverage behind you, you can be aggressive, you can jump a little bit more freely, you've got more freedom, you're liberated to drive forward with the ball as well, again, because you have that extra coverage. And then the other thing that they mentioned, and this was throughout the article, was how important mobility from the outside centre-backs are. And I think this is to your point, Ryan, where in defensive transition, you'll often be in a 3 because your wing backs will be high. So even though the logic might be, we'll have 3 at the back, we'll be a little bit more solid defensively, in those moments you're a man down, you're weaker potentially, and you might be matched up against 3 forwards, and so you've got more ground to cover than if you were in a 4 with traditional fullbacks. So those outside centre backs need to be pretty mobile. But it depends on. Like, to answer this question, it depends on what role you have in the back 3 and also how you're implementing the back 3, because there'll be moments like Simeone ball, Chilismo, you will have a flat back 5 in a lot of defensive moments, and so that's very different to what I was just talking about there.
Yeah, definitely so. And I suppose whether or not you're doing a back 3 or a back 2, there's just adjustments that a defender's going to have to make going from club to international level either. A defender in a national team is going to be asked to doing different things, most likely, to what he does at his club as well. So there's calculations at play, no matter what system an international player, a top-level player is going for.
I'm sure I read an article not so long ago, it may have been before the Euros actually, that in international soccer, defenders face quite a large, a higher percentage of aerial balls. They're defending more crosses, they're defending more long passes forward, just because international teams in an attacking sense tend not to be as intricate in their attacking sequences. So that's a consideration.
There you go. All right, Calvin, thank you very much indeed for your question. We take one more quick break. When we come back, we ask some serious questions about the Premier League and its ongoing structure. And of course, we get to Graham's giant wardrobe of shirts and ask who cares. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Richard Rolson's been in touch. Hi, Richard. Is there a danger that the English Premier League is going to become a closed league where 17 teams are a constant and the relegation teams are in the cycle that go up and down from the Championship and back? It's an interesting question, Taylor. The 3 promoted teams from last season are currently, as we record, occupying the bottom 3 slots in the Premier League. That has only actually happened twice before, that the 3 teams have gone up and straight back down again. 1998 and last season. So that was Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United going straight up and straight down. So it doesn't happen a lot, but also if it happens again this season, that's a pattern that's being established here.
That's the thing, man, because I think this has been the idea of it becoming a closed league. Is it just 3 up, 3 down every single year? It's been a talking point going back to like World Soccer Talk days in 2008. I feel like I remember them discussing this, and is this going to be a problem, and what will happen? And I think it's been off and on maybe a concern. It feels like a real concern these days, more relevant than ever. For the point you just made, Ryan, what have I said that made you all laugh?
No, just
not a fire truck.
I think the cops are coming for Ryan Bailey's football kit opinion in a couple of minutes.
New York Hotel recording, everybody.
Well, I'll say I think with the fact that all 3 went down last year, combined with it feels like all 3 might go down this year, it does feel like we are in a situation that this is closer than ever, because I think there's also the fact that the value of championship clubs isn't really closing the gap, even if you have a few exceptions of clubs that have very high earning, very wealthy owners who could maybe spend a bunch of money to get them into like kind of cemented Premier League status. I think there were fewer of those than ever. And then at the same time, I think the Premier League clubs themselves look stronger than ever, almost from top to bottom. If you remove those 3 in the relegation zones, like Newcastle certainly aren't back to being in a relegation conversation anytime soon. Nottingham Forest are all of a sudden very solid. West Ham and Everton seem like they are on much sounder footing than they have been previously. So there aren't as many clubs who you can think are going to implode or shoot themselves in the foot or just make the wrong signings and have their season fall apart. It's why I think Manchester United and Tottenham are so low in the table this year, because so many other Premier League teams around them are much stronger. I think that there are potential contenders in the championship that would maybe be able to kind of stay competitive. Leeds with the York family and Red Bull, they have a ton of money behind them, as do Stoke City, as do Bristol City, and even Sunderland with Kirill Louis-Dreyfus, a relative of Julia Louis, we would assume. There's a billionaire in there. That's an ancestral billionaire at that. So there are clubs that I think could spend money and become established Premier League teams, but you have to become an established Premier League team to do that, and I think that's becoming harder and harder.
Yeah, definitely. Graham, your thoughts on this one? Do we think we're just going to have a cycle of maybe 5 or 6 teams who just sort of yo-yo up and down at this point?
I mean, to be honest, I think that's already happened, and we had this discussion last season, and I sort of batted it away as a concern, as you said, Ryan. It hadn't happened since the 90s, so I thought, well, we've just got 3 bad teams this season, so I thought it was probably an anomaly. I'm changing my view on that now, because it's, as you say, it's going to happen for a second straight season, and not only is it going to happen again, at no point have Southampton, Leicester, or Ipswich to a lesser extent, at least they've put up a little bit of a fight, but if we're being real about this, at no point have any of those 3 teams looked like they could stay up. It's a mismatch, them being in the Premier League at the moment. And what's just as concerning is if you look at the top 3 in the Championship, it's Leeds, it's Sheffield United, it's Burnley, 2 of the 3 teams that went down last season, and then 1 of the teams that went down the season before. So you have this like loop where the money from the Premier League is also warping the Championship and making it less competitive, but that money isn't enough for these teams to compete in the Premier League. So well done, everyone. That's just a great scenario for those clubs to be in. I do kind of wonder if, not quite as much as last season where I thought we just had 3 bad teams, I do kind of wonder, or my hope is that again, even though it's 2 seasons in a row, we kind of have 3 exceptional cases this season where Leicester had PSR concerns backdated a number of seasons. Southampton got promoted ahead of schedule. Ipswich are basically playing with the same team that they had in League One a couple seasons ago when they had those back-to-back promotions. So it was maybe never realistic for those teams to make a real go of it. I think next season will be the real test. To your point, Taylor, about the strength of the teams that might be coming up, because you do have Leeds who have real financial backing, have the Red Bull connection. You've got Burnley, who I know went down last season, but also have real financial backing. So if those teams aren't able with their resources, and obviously Leeds are a big club, Sunderland's a big club as well, if those clubs are still not able to make a real go of it next season, then yeah, I think the Premier League has a pretty fundamental issue to address.
Yeah, it almost becomes a closed league. So, in that sense, I think I've got the solution here. Hear me out on this one. 32 teams, a North and South division, 16 teams at the end with a bracket.
Love it.
Yeah? What do we think? We'll get Garber as a consultant.
I think you've solved it. I think well done, Ryan Bailey. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. So then none of the teams who are in the South have to have the indignity of travelling north until like the very end of the season. So many benefits.
I mean, they'll miss out on going to Old Trafford Junior and the Circus Tent, which of course will be the best stadium. Definitely getting built within the next 5 years. They'll miss out on that opportunity.
With some of your tax money, Graham, probably. Wonderful. Very good indeed.
Oh, hi Taylor.
Oh wow. Taylor, anything more to say on this? The hegemony of the Premier League?
Yeah, I don't like either one of you. Is that helpful?
If you had to pick.
Both. My answer is both.
I appreciate the feedback, Taylor. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, of course.
Richard, thank you very much indeed for your question. Let's get to one more listener question in this episode, shall we? It's from Lawrence Yee, who says, with news that Liverpool have switched or are switching from Nike to Adidas as their kit provider, do you, or fans in general, care? Or as long as the home kit is red, is that all that really matters? Graham, when we mentioned this on the feed recently, I think we mentioned that the switch was going to Adidas. I didn't know it wasn't Adidas currently. I had to admit, because this kind of thing, not that long ago, would have excited me a lot. Like, when the new kits for Wimbledon, my team, came out each season, that felt like Christmas. It was an incredibly exciting time. And I think it's just a sign of me becoming older and grumpier. Or maybe just, I don't know what it's a sign of, but it's...
So when does that hit? When am I going to lose my interest in kits? Because I was fully interested in that story. We did a Patreon on it, right? We've spoken about this before.
Yeah.
I can't remember when that was or where that was. But when does that hit, Ryan? So I can prepare for it. What age?
Maybe it's when the recession hits and the UK doesn't switch to a kit-based economy. Then maybe your outlook will change. That's what I suggest.
Oh man, I'm kind of hoping that'll happen. Rather than investing or having a pension, I've just been buying kits these last few years. So you're saying that won't pay off?
You need to get Graham, you need to invent a kit coin. That's what you need to do. That's the future for you. Kit coin. Make it happen.
Oh man, the thing is, that's not even the most ridiculous cryptocurrency out there. If there was a kit coin, there's far worse out there.
It's not in the top 100, I would say.
No.
Right. But more sincerely, Graham, like Nike and Adidas, they're just, you're going to get like a good level of apparel with either. Does it really matter? Is there a big fundamental difference between those or any other brand?
No.
Fundamentally, no. But like that's not how you live life. Like dealing in the fundamentals. Like fundamentally, every movie has a soundtrack and actors, and it tells a story. But like it's in the nuance of how it does that, right? That's
David Lynch ones did that.
You just described Joe's film review for every movie he's seen, I'm pretty sure.
There were people in it, and it had a beginning and an end and a credit scene. Yeah, that's pretty much every Marvel movie. Fans do care about this stuff. Obviously, there will be some who don't, but the little video that Adidas put out for the Liverpool announcement, which, by the way, was a projection onto the Museum of Liverpool at the Albert Docks with the tagline, "The worst kept secret in football," which doesn't make sense if people don't care about this stuff. That video had 5 million views on Twitter alone. I couldn't find it on Instagram. I'm sure it's out there on Instagram and Facebook, but it's got millions of views. That video. It was on the front page of the BBC Sport homepage. It was on the Guardian homepage. Like, people do care about this stuff. You've got an entire segment of the internet dedicated to kit news and kit leaks. And I realise that I am interested in this stuff more than most. But I've experienced it with the layman where, like, Scotland will release a kit. Before the Euros, Scotland released a kit that was divisive. And I went to Stirling Albion game the week that happened. And people who never talked to me about kit releases were saying to me, "Oh, did you see the Scotland kit? What did you think about it?" So, like, people do care about this stuff. Maybe not everyone, but they do.
Is the person who asked you that question you in the mirror, Graham? Just out of curiosity. No, I mean,
it was my alter ego, kit coin hoarder
Graham,
or hodler.
Graham pretending to have a mustache on, asking that question. Graham, a genuine question, because we are teasing you. With the kits that you do have, how much of it is like basically the memory of the shirt, of the team, of the player? Like, is that what it is? It's basically like you could look at that jersey and be like, "Oh, I remember that team in this time period. They had this player. They were fun for this reason."
Totally.
Yeah,
I think
so in that way,
that
I get
is
it.
why I care.
Yeah, because it's a much bigger, more expensive scrapbook at that point, right? It's basically how you kind of keep your memory connection to teams, to players, to competitions that mattered to you. And in that way, I think they can matter, and I think that's where it can be really interesting. Like this Liverpool one, I won't say it like was a news link I clicked on, even if it is the worst kept secret in football, which means that football is very good at keeping secrets in my mind. But to Graham's point, it harkens to a different era and a different style of jersey, and you can kind of reference that and remind people of that history, remind people of that team, and you can kind of keep older teams permanently in the mind while also kind of giving your team new designs and new looks. And so generally I think I don't care, but for the reasons I might, I think is if it connects to history or has an interesting story behind it, or even if it doesn't connect to history but just has the interesting story, like the Ajax, like was it like a reggae kit that they had, a Bob Marley kit?
Yeah, the
like,
Bob Marley
like not too long ago. Little things like that, like those collaborations, I think can be really interesting and unique. I also think, and these two are maybe more like unique to your own supporterdom, but if the previous kit manufacturer was very bad or low effort, or if the new one has been doing really interesting stuff, Manchester United is a prime example of that for me, where I think there's the era of, I think it was Nike, it might have been Adidas actually, but I think it was Nike where you had AIG and just different logos, and it just didn't feel very inspired. It felt kind of same with a bad shirt sponsor on the front. And so the Adidas era felt like the opportunity for a fresh start and something new, and I'm not sure that's really ended up being the case, but it felt like it could be. And I think those changes can sort of align with a new era, a change in direction, more money coming in, more success, whatever you want to go with. And so I think it can be interesting. But generally, I think the reason why those stories do well is when it's the biggest kit deal in the world, or a team that's always been with this sponsor has now moved to this sponsor. If Bayern played in Nike, I think that would be a pretty huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, you surely remember when Puma, right? You remember that story when it seemed like Puma were gonna strike with Barcelona a long time ago.
Surely remember that
was
surely.
Yeah, does my face give away that I surely do not? my blank expression of like,
was it yesterday, Graham?
We're very different people. That was a huge story in my world, that Barcelona were going to leave Nike. To your point, Taylor, about certain clubs are synonymous with certain brands, and so that was a big story. But I think that's part of it with Adidas for Liverpool is there was so much excitement about Nike becoming their sponsor, and they've not delivered. Like this season's Liverpool home shirt is dreadful. Like it's the worst in the Premier League. So I think there's a sense that Adidas are a little bit more reliable at the moment with what they've done with Arsenal, with some of the stuff they've done for Manchester United as well, Newcastle. So I think that's part of it, is Liverpool fans are a little bit sick with Nike.
Question for you both, not even necessarily just with shirts, but with gear in general. Do you have a provider that you tend to prefer? If you're buying cleats, if you're buying, if you're buying boots or a shirt, like, are you more inclined to buy one if it has a certain company behind it?
For me, yes. I like for my gym apparel and stuff. There's only two brands I really buy: the Nike stuff and our friends from Canada who make the Lululemon.
I knew that was going to get mentioned.
I knew that was. I kind of assumed that was going to be your answer.
That's just because I like the cut of what they do, and I don't know. Maybe there's Nike and Adidas. I don't think there's a lot of difference between them, but I tend to go with Nike stuff.
Yeah, I definitely have go-tos for things like that. So football boots, Umbro. They don't ask me why, but Umbro boots have more support on the they have more support on the heels. I bought Predis last year, had to return them because they didn't. I felt like I couldn't run in them. Tracksuit bottoms, Adidas. Shorts, Adidas. T-shirts, Nike. Football shirts, I would prefer Hummel as my first choice for basically anything. But I think Adidas are ahead of Nike at the moment. I'm trying to think what else.
Graham's on another level to us, Taylor. I think is what we're learning here.
Yeah, he left out socks and underwear. I'm surprised we didn't get the
underwear.
full
Calvin
collection.
Klein, always, every single day. Socks.
Oh, Martin McFly. Nice.
Yeah, that's my Martin McFly tribute. I can't get away with the orange life preserver, so I wear Calvin Klein underwear.
Very good. All right. I mean, I guess.
Wait, have I seen you? I've seen Graham rock a puffy vest before, haven't I? I feel like that's a thing you've worn.
I have an orange life preserver from when I dressed as Martin McFly for Halloween.
I knew it. Yeah, from which is every day that ends in Y. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, every day's Halloween.
Yeah. I'm Adidas, by the way. I go Adidas for most things.
You do? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think Taylor, ultimately where I land on this question is I think I'm interested in kits and releases as a moment and sort of to define an era. Like I always think as Man United as Umbro and Sharp on their shirts, but I don't care whether Nike or Adidas make them ultimately, because I think it's ultimately all just kind of the same thing.
A little bit.
Ryan,
I'm with you on that one.
would you be able to go through the Premier League 20 teams and name every kit supplier, current kit supplier?
All right, test me.
Right
Test me now. Test me.
Arsenal.
Nike?
Oh, God.
Is it not?
Struck out straight away. No, it's Adidas.
Oh, it's Adidas.
They've
It's
not been
Adidas,
Nike
right,
for a
right.
while. They were Puma before Adidas. Okay, here's a tough one. Bournemouth.
Bournemouth are...
A brand
Is it-
that's
it's a-
potentially close to your heart, being a
Is it
child of
Hummel?
the 90s.
Lululemon?
No.
Is
Umbro.
it... It's Umbro. I should have known that. All right, I don't think we should go
You're not
further,
great at
because
this
I'm not gonna get any of these.
Do you think most people are, Graham? like I think I thought that was a jest question. I didn't realize that you were actually asking sincerely. No, I don't think I could get most of them. I would have said Nike for Arsenal as well.
Yeah.
Manchester United? What? Surely. Wimbledon?
Rags. It's well they
yes.
don't get new shirts anymore. They have to recycle the ones that were previously worn. That's how
It's bin bags. No, it's bin bags.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ratcliffe.
There you go.
City is Puma, correct?
That's right, yep.
That's right, yeah. Graham,
Southampton is Puma?
Southampton...
Are they Castore?
Is Puma, yeah. No, they're not Castore.
okay. Let's
Everton
stop
are.
this. But Graham, just a quick one for you. Shakhtar Donetsk 2007, who are they?
Puma. Do you have the answer in front of you?
I have no way of
Oh, I
finding
thought
out.
you were going to
I
give me the
just wanna
answer.
see- I wanna see
It's
how
not a fun
quickly
game
get
if you
it.
don't have the answer.
Well, now I'm googling Shakhtar Donetsk 2007 to see.
Do it real quick. I bet it is Puma. I bet he's absolutely nailed that question. But yeah, Graham, your recall of kit manufacturers is almost as impressive as your recall. of-
Adidas, you simpleton.
Oh, strike the record. I take back everything I just said.
Actually, that's from 2007, 2008. I can't say for sure what 2006, 2007 was.
Either way, he's failed. He's failed this test. Let's all
I'm not
agree
failed
on
if
that.
I'm right.
All right, on
Quickly
that note,
Googling.
let's wrap up listener questions. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on this episode. If you'd like to submit a question, you can either go to totalsoccershow.com/questions and leave us one there, or you can join our Discord, patreon.com/totalsoccershow, the best way to support us. Hope you are there and enjoying it. We'll have a chat with you in said Discord. But for now, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Graham, thank you for sharing all of your kit knowledge, genuinely, because I think we tease you, but I enjoyed it immensely.
They're currently Puma. They weren't Puma in 2007, though. They were Adidas, so...
I retract my thanks. Ryan, thank you to you and you alone.
Thank you, yeah. You know it's not 2007, right, Graham?
I mean, if you say so, that is you're a child of the 90s. I think the noughties is my era. I'm still spiritually in 2007.
Fair enough. All right, let's leave it there then. Thank you very much, everybody who's left a question. Thank you to Taylor and Graham. Thank you, listener, for joining us here. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye.